Welcome to Sales and Cigars. I'm your host, Walter Crosby from Helix Sales Development. Today's episode was a lot of fun to record. There's a lot of value for any entrepreneur, business person, or sales leader who's afraid to get on stage. This is an episode about how you can get more comfortable, what the work is that you need to do. There's a free offer in here to help you figure out how to structure this. It's just, there's laughter, there's value, there's education, and there's real impact in your business because you can really change your ability to grow by getting on stage if you're an entrepreneur or business owner. So go grab a cigar, grab a cocktail, strap in for another impactful episode of Sales and Cigars. Danny, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to jump on. I know we rescheduled this, so thank you. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Walter. I wish we were in person. I could hang out with you for days and get in trouble.
Yeah, we did a little chat in the green room, which we were not going to bring up, but it's just easy to talk to certain people.
Yeah.
About bad stuff. Anyway, is there a book that you either reread or you gift a lot to your colleagues and clients?
Well, I usually push whatever book I've written, the latest book I've written. So the last book I wrote was called Misfits and Crackpots. So that's the one I've been pushing. But if I'm going to push another book, one of my...
You wrote a book about me and I didn't know.
What's that?
You wrote a book about me. I didn't know.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we're both in that club. One of my mentors was a guy named Jack Canfield. He's probably best known for the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, but he also wrote a wonderful book called The Success Principles. And the moment I read that, I told a coach I had been working with, I'm like, oh my gosh, this book is $20. The stories are amazing. The points are right on. I would have paid $25 just for the bibliography. I got to meet this guy. And turned out he was speaking at an event. So I actually canceled a speaking event I was at just so I could meet Jack and work with Jack, and wonderful human being. And so I can't praise him enough for the Success Principles. Fantastic book.
That is a great book. I haven't looked at that in a while. Shame on me. That's a great book for anybody out there that hasn't looked at that. Go grab a copy because his stuff is great. He's very approachable from like the story you just told, but from what other people have told me, that guys like that are really approachable. Like you go up on stage, which we'll talk about, but you're approachable as well. And I think people just need to realize that we're all people and we all put our pants on the same way, hopefully. And we can, sorry.
I don't know nowadays, Walter, how people are putting their pants on.
But people are humans, and we can relate to them if we just try to be another human being. So
well said.
I mean, I got to meet Michael Gerber.
Is he great?
Eamon.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
He was very, very the guy that wrote the book. You can hear his voice in the book, and he sat there and talked to me for 20 minutes about a concept that I was struggling with, and he was very generous. And funny. It's just hilarious. So I think that's a great book. Thank you very much. So let's talk a little bit about how you got to where you are, what you're doing, what that journey looked like before we jump into the stage work.
Well, I think I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. I've had lots of pivots in my life. So over 30 years ago, I was a journalist covering President Bush Sr. on the 92 campaign. And I had the greatest job in the world working for a company that represented all the editors in the country. And so I had a major daily newspaper offer me a job for $16,500 a year to do the city beat. And then a friend of mine said, hey, they're actually hiring teachers in inner city Los Angeles for $25,000 a year. So I became a teacher for the noblest of reasons, Walter, for the high pay. And it turned out I loved teaching, and I went from I taught all age levels, from preschoolers all the way up to rocket scientists. I became a professor and a researcher, and then in 2005, my wife and I attended a real estate seminar, which turned out to be a scam, and we lost everything. And I could sit here and moan about how what was me, but I prefer looking at the positive. So first of all, my wife is my soulmate. I put her through the ringer and she stuck by me. Second of all, I no longer think money is the end all be all because you can lose it just like that. Third, I try not to judge other people because if I was somebody looking at what I did, I would have said, you deserve that. But now I realize if you don't know everything about a person, you really don't know anything about a person. Fourth, I became a Christian, which I'm always embarrassed to say, but the more I read the Bible, I'm not the first screw up to find Jesus. And fifth, and this is most importantly, I didn't want to have to file bankruptcy. And my accountant said, well, in order to do that, you have to make this much more money a year. So I started speaking on the side and I hit the number right on the number. Well, so the next year, he gave me a much higher number and I hit that number right on the number. So in year three, I thought, well, maybe I should set a higher number. And basically, during one of the worst economic downturns, I built up a speaking business, which was incredible until a thing called COVID happened, and people were like, "How's your speaking business?" I'm like, "Oh, the way I just lost 200 speaking engagements overnight because there's no public engagements. It's great." And so I had to
Yeah.
make another pivot. People for years had been asking me to coach them, and I always resisted coaching because as a teacher, I've always had a high standard and I hold people accountable. I want people to do the work and to succeed, and I stay on their backs until they do. But now, having done it now for about 4 or 5 years, I'm loving it, especially working with entrepreneurs. They're exactly the kind of people I want to work with because these are people that are motivated. And, I always tell people for speaking, there's two ways to get better at speaking. You should watch a lot of speakers. And second of all, one of my mentors was a guy named Jim Rohn. And Jim used to always say, you can't pay other people to do your push-ups. Translation, you got to do the work. You got to do the reps. And so I love it. And so that's a very long answer to your short question.
But it's a great answer because it tells a real story. So I want to go back to one of the first things you covered 41, right?
Yep.
What you said.
He's a great man.
Ride on Air Force One?
I never got to fly in Air Force. It bums me out because a friend of mine was one of the Air Force guys that flew Air Force One, but I never got to go on Air Force One, unfortunately. And I never even got a photo with the president because I had written something that he didn't like, and he wouldn't give my. So I got my photo with Ross Perot, but not with President Bush Sr. But and this isn't political, but that was a man of integrity. He was a really good man, and you learn a lot from how he treated people.
Yeah, yeah, we can probably avoid the politics. We probably should avoid the religion. But I had a religion question too. But I mean, the getting mad at you because you wrote a piece he didn't like, that's a true politician, right? And that's what he was.
Yeah.
Good, bad, and indifferent. He was a smart guy. Raised some crazy children, but he I mean, what I found was interesting about him that he was the CIA director, and he was in so many different positions in government. But it seemed like he didn't enjoy that as much as other leaders in those positions. Like it seemed like he was doing it, but he didn't necessarily, his heart wasn't in it, which is good.
Yeah, on his 90th birthday, he has one of my favorite quotes. They asked him what his proudest accomplishment in his life had been. And you're right, he had been a CIA director, ambassador to China, congressman, vice president, probably no better prepared person to be president of the United States. And they asked him, of all your accomplishments, what are you the most proud of? And he said, I'm 90 years old and my kids still call me once a week. I'm like, wow, that really just, that captivated. It shows exactly what his values were.
Where the priorities were.
Yeah, pretty neat guy.
I remember people talking about him that he was cooking breakfast for his grandkids on a Sunday morning, making pancakes in a t-shirt and boxer shorts, just like
that's great.
The rest of us might be, but he was doing it in the White House. Anyway, so it's a great story, and losing everything is something that I think, I mean, it makes us humble, of course, but you went to the place where it helps you realize that everybody has a story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what informs them as to who they are and how they react to those situations. And being, I don't know, it's sort of the stoic idea, right? From Stoicism that, that thing, that obstacle, is really where we need to go. We need to get past that, over it, through it, under it, around it, whatever it is, and that becomes the way we get better. And you know, that's, I mean, that happens to a lot of people. People don't talk about it, but it's happened to some great. One of our greatest presidents, went bankrupt 3 times.
Yeah.
Failed miserably, and he did okay, aside from getting shot in the head. That was bad. Um, so we wanted to talk about something that is really scary to most people. And entrepreneurs need to do this. They need to be prepared to do this. And it scares the hell out of me. And in the green room, I told you a story about, me getting up to do a speech that I had prepared for 3 months, and rewrote 21 different times, and practiced and practiced and practiced. Luckily, because everything failed technologically when I got to where we were going. But it's a scary thing, and it's a skill set that needs to be cultivated. Um, and you do it naturally, which is not fair because you work to get there to do it, but you make it seem easy. And what goes into that? What kind of advice do we give the audience of people that are terrified to get on a stage?
Well, I'll share a story with you. I was in India speaking to a school, got all the kids pumped up, and this little 6-year-old boy comes up to me at the end. He's got tears in his eyes, and I notice he's missing his left arm, and he's like, "What can I do to succeed?" And so I crouched down to his eye level. I said, "When I was your age, I went to 18 different schools before I was 12 years old. Everybody called me stupid because I stuttered. And finally, I went to school, and this teacher, she took me aside, and she would sing things to me, and I would sing them back, and I didn't have my stutter, kind of like the movie The King's Speech. Eventually, I got rid of my stutter, and I became a swan. But I looked at that little boy, and I said, "Isn't it interesting that the little boy that everybody said was stupid and they made fun of now gets paid extraordinary sums of money to travel the world to do what?" And he just got the biggest grin on his face. Speak. I'm like, don't let anybody ever tell you what you can't do. Anything's possible. And so I have worked with professional speakers, but most of the people I work with are business people, entrepreneurs, people that are scared to death to go on stage. And all I do is I help them. First of all, I want them to have fun. So many of these speaking things that I see, people are teaching you, oh, tell everybody about the darkest moment of your life. Walter, there's 3 reasons why I don't do that. First of all, the world just survived a global pandemic. Everybody's had some bad things happen to them. I don't think we need another sad story. I think we need some hope. Second of all, I'm teaching people how to create a speech that they're going to deliver again and again. So President Bush, when he was running for president, he'd give the same speech 20 times a day to different audiences. I could probably say it better than he could. It's called a stump speech. For superhero movies, they call it the origin story. My business partner, Coach Jimmy Hayes Nelson, and I, we call it a well-crafted story. You can call it peanut butter and jelly, but what we're trying to do is to teach you how to tell this story again and again. Well, if you're telling a sad story, do you really want to tell that story 1,000 times? I've heard people tell these horrible stories. I'm like, man, I couldn't do that all the time. And third, and this is where I get in trouble, I have one objective when I'm on stage. I want you to leave feeling better than when you came in. I want you laughing, smiling, happy. I think there's something admirable about that as an objective. These people that tell the same sad story again and again, by the 20th time they're telling it, those are now crocodile tears, and now you're being manipulative. And I'm not saying it's not an effective sales strategy. It's actually a very effective sales strategy. But I personally don't want to have to take a shower after I speak every time because I just manipulated my audience. And so I'm trying to show people, I'm really lighthearted. You and I get along immediately. I like people that take their job seriously, but don't take themselves too seriously because you ain't all that, neither am I. If you think you're all that, teach kindergarten for a week. When I was teaching kindergarten, I had this little girl, LaShonda, raise her hand. I'm like, LaShonda, question. She's like, Miss Brassell, when are you going to trim your nose hair? I'm like, this afternoon. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. I ain't all that. So I want people laughing. I was working with an engineer from Silicon Valley a couple of weeks ago. So Indian engineer, and he's a very introverted person. He's like, Danny, I need you to make me funny. I'm like, well, we don't need to make you funny. We just need to make you a little bit more personable. So he has a very difficult name to pronounce. I'm not going to give you his name, but it's like 20 syllables, like Shubhankar Manharaji. And so all we did at the beginning of his speech, he now says, "Hello, my name is Shubhankar Manharaji." He pauses. Gee, I sure hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And now people laugh and they're, okay, I can relate to this guy, because that's all people. It's probably the most simple, fundamental suggestion I give to anybody speaking. Stop talking about your successes. Talk about your failures, because the more most of the people in your audience have failed, but not all of them have succeeded. The more you talk about your own failures, the more they're going to love you. And if you watch comedians, I watch a lot of comedians, they're experts at this. So if you watch, like, Kevin Hart's a short black guy, so he makes a lot of jokes about being a short black guy. Jim Gaffigan's a big fat white guy, so he makes a lot of jokes about being a big fat white guy. What I love about what they're showing you is whatever you perceive as your weakness, turn it into your strength. Turn it against it. Like, that's how you become more effective as a speaker. So again, very long answer to your short question.
But it's being vulnerable is a piece of that.
That's
Being honest,
mm-hmm.
Being humble, and sometimes that comes out of that is that the funny.
Yeah.
I love watching comedians and watching their delivery, and I can relate to. I don't know if relate is the right word, but different styles are entertaining in their own right. Like a guy like Mark Maron, who is over here telling these stories, and then you got guys that are doing jokes. I mean, they're both funny in their own way, because they own it, and they're delivering what they want. But
Yeah.
So being who you are is part of what you're saying. Is when you get on stage, it's just being yourself is a piece of this.
Yeah.
But you still need to craft your message. You need to craft your delivery, to I don't know, be the right motion, the right physicality to being on stage. Is that a piece of this as well?
I don't know if that's as important. A lot of, like, these speaker organizations, they say you have to walk in a V. I'm like, I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, if that was the case, it's kind of like I went to a Hollywood training once, and they're like, oh, you have to do this for your face, and and I'm like, if that were the case, why are the top YouTube videos of, like, kids biting each other's fingers and guys getting a ball in the crowd? I don't think you have to be perfect. I think you already said it. You have to be you. You have this podcast, you're smoking a stogie, you're relaxed. That's you. Like, I understand your personality. It's the same thing with what you were talking about with comedians. I start to get to feel like I know this person. I mean, Roseanne Barr, when she used to be a comedian, she was hilarious. I remember she'd be like, "You ever get directions from a regular person and directions from a fat person? A regular person's like, you go up 3 blocks, you turn left, and my house is the 4th one on the right. A fat person's like, you go up past the Dairy Queen, you turn left at the McDonald's, and I'm right over by the 7-Eleven." She was just hilarious, and she was herself. And
Yeah.
that's what you got to do. You got to be your character. People can detect BS now better than ever. And, you watch Blazing Saddles, and Cleavon Little, he's like, you can't be the Cisco kid. I can't remember the Cisco kid or whatever. And Gene Wilder, he holds up his hand. He's like, steady as a rock. He's like, yeah, but I shoot with this hand. I'm like, yeah, that's how most of us feel. Is most of us, we're really like this. We're like shaking like crazy. And I had a guy about 3 months ago. He had the worst stage fright. And I'm like, just embrace it. Tell people you're nervous, because audiences actually want you to succeed. They don't want you to be uncomfortable on stage. They'll kind of cheer for you. The more you point out all of your flaws, they're going to love you for it. And he just
Unless they're in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Unless you're in Philadelphia, then they're getting for you.
They'll throw batteries at you in Philly.
Yeah, especially if you're Santa.
Mm.
The thing that people aren't comfortable with is, right. So, like, I have a vendor who uses some of my stuff. Right, we're partners, and they put stuff out there. And the one marketing lady won't use any images of me with a cigar.
Mm.
Right. And she said that's, it's offensive. And I'm like, it's offensive to some people. Yes. And I understand that, and they have the right to their opinion, but I don't care. Right. my audience, I am not for everybody.
That's right.
And I'm okay with that. I'm good with like these people over here, and that's enough, right? Because I don't try. If I try to be everything to all people, I'm never going to be. I'm never going to be successful. I'm never going to be comfortable, and I'm never going to be happy. Um, and what does Seth Godin say? The smallest viable audience is really what you need to work towards.
Yeah.
Um,
There's lots of wisdom. I mean, when I first started speaking, I'd get 500 positive comments on the evaluation form, and then there'd be like two that just said I'm the Antichrist. And one of my mentors, he looked at me and he's like, "Hey, Danny, 5% of your audience, they hate you, and they hated you before they ever met you." And it's the same thing with this woman with her. You're not trying to appease the woman that doesn't like the cigar. As a matter of fact, it's kind of like I was working with an entrepreneur and he's trying to be all things to everybody. I'm like, you don't want to cater to Walmart shoppers because they're a pain in the butt. So I always give the example. I have two friends that are waiters. One's a waiter at Morton's. The other one's a waiter at Applebee's. The guy that is a waiter at Morton's, he averages like $150 per table he waits. The guy that works at Applebee's, he averages $8 per table. And the people are like, "I want a steak, but can you make half of it medium rare and the other half well done?" I'm like, it's a nightmare. You don't want to deal with that person.
but you have to know. You have to know that. You have to be willing to accept that not being liked by certain people, and it's a and getting on the stage makes you very vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
to that, right? So, and most people will be like 500 people like that. This is great. The two people, that's what they focus their attention on, and we just like remove those from our eye and don't worry about it and focus on the people that we can impact, the people that we can help.
That's right.
And that's something else that when we first spoke, you said something. I forget the exact wording, but it was about having integrity on stage, and you alluded to it earlier. But not feeling like you got to go take a shower after you've done something, and being tough on people. Right? Those are things that they go hand in hand. I think especially in the coaching world.
Yeah.
Right? Like I struggle with people who don't care as much as I care about their success.
Mm-hmm.
So I become very picky about the people that I work with. So if I have a team of salespeople that are, if there's 10 people in the room and two of them are just really not wanting to participate, don't want to be there, I'll ask a couple of questions and they give me their pushback, and I'm like, well, there's the door.
Mm-hmm.
Feel free to. You're not obligated to be here.
You got a choice.
Well, like the boss said I had to be there. Well, I'll tell the boss that I told you could leave. You just have to explain to him why you know all of this. That's your call. But please leave.
What you're
And
saying is really wise, Walter, because it's counterintuitive. It's kind of like when I first started speaking, I was working for two speakers bureaus and I was making about $700 a day. And they didn't find me any gigs for 2 months. And I turned to my wife. I'm like, if they're not going to find me gigs, I'm going to have them not find me gigs at the rate I want. And so I doubled my rate to $1,500. And within 48 hours, they booked me on 5 stages. And because of that, every time I go through a slow period, I raise the rates. I mean, now as a coach, people are like, "How expensive are you?" I'm like, "I'm very expensive. You probably can't afford me. Here's other people that you want to go to." Because I want to make it very clear, you ain't getting me for cheap, but you are going to get me. You're going to get 100% of me. I'm going to be on you, and we're going to succeed. But you got to do the work, and it's an investment.
and please don't start if you're not willing to walk down that
Exactly.
bumpy path,
Of
because
course.
it's going to be uncomfortable and it's going to be bumpy.
Yep.
But at the other side of it is this beautiful paradise where you're going to have growth and be successful. But what's weird is that we think more highly of their capabilities than they do. I've tried to figure that part out, and I've never come up with a really good rationale for that. Like where I can see that they have capabilities, they just need to hone their skills. And and change their mindset. Usually, is
Yeah.
the biggest.
When I was
Uh,
a teacher, I used to tell my little ones. I always said, sometimes you need somebody else to believe in you before you believe in yourself. I believe in all of you. They only give me the best and the brightest. Now let's go make this world a better place. You tell a person that enough, they start believing it, and it's the same with adults. I mean, uh, I've actually worked some of the people I've worked with are very successful, and you get them one on one, and they're a complete wreck. They're a basket case. They have no self confidence, and everybody. That's why I love Rocky. Everybody needs a Mickey just yelling at you. And you just need somebody in your corner. So I mean, I think that's what it is. Everybody wants somebody in their corner.
yeah, and we don't always have that person, and when they present themselves, you got to be ready
Mm-hmm.
to accept that and take on that challenge.
Yep.
Um, so I mean, we've talked a lot about being on stage, why it's important, being who you are, being humble, sharing your failures rather than throwing your successes in everybody's faces and mixing it up. But I've seen people where that they're just working the circuit, right, and they're just running around that because they just come out of a political situation or they
Mm-hmm.
stop being a general, right, and now they're out on the road and there's often like this lack of sincerity there. Like
Mm-hmm.
they have a great story, but it's like they don't want to be there, and
Yeah.
it comes through. And and I think that's part of the fear that we're not sure we can share our passion. So I'm thinking about I'm going to call out General Powell because I've heard him speak, and it just seemed like he wasn't really excited about doing what he was doing. He had great stories. He had the ability to really impact people, and he had done a great job. But is the stage for everybody?
Definitely not. I mean, it's not for everybody, but again, the reason people are hiring me is because they want to increase their influence and the number of customers that they're acquiring. I generally work with people that you know they're just trying to get more customers. So Jimmy and I were working with this guy Richard about 3 months ago. He's a very successful financial advisor, and he started his speech. He said, "Oh, I have 30 years in the business. I've made over $1 billion for my clients. I've worked with these famous people, yada yada yada." And I said, "Richard, what are the three most important aspects of real estate? Location, location, location. It's all right for you to brag, but you're doing it at the wrong part of your presentation. You need to be more vulnerable." I mean, Brene Brown's really smart about how she talks about vulnerability. I agree with her on that. And so now we switched his speech. So the beginning now he talks about the very first client he ever got. And it's basically a comedy of errors. He did everything wrong. It's amazing this person ever signed with him. And he did it 2 weeks later. So he does like once or twice a week. He goes to he rents out like a steakhouse for 15 couples that are going to decide to put their money with him. And he said he usually would book about 6 out of the 15 to an appointment. And the guy's always sitting there with his arms crossed, like, "What are you selling?" Now that he uses the news story, he says that same guy is leaning forward, patting his knee, laughing so hard. And he said he's increased the number of appointments from 6 to 12. He doubled it. Your results may vary, but what I loved about that was he did the work. He actually put it. He did the work. This is something you and I were passionate about. I tell people you got to put in the reps. I had a guy, Jason, 3 years ago, and I told him what I tell everybody: you got to do the reps. I'm like, even the smallest town in America has a Lions Club, a Rotary Club, an Optimist Club. You can talk to synagogues, you can talk to churches and to schools and to chambers of commerce. And he's like, "No, I don't know anybody." I'm like, just being Debbie Downer drove me nuts. I said, "Hey, do you have a Facebook account?" He said, "Yes." I'm like, "I want you going on Facebook Live tonight, and I'm going to be there, and I want you to deliver this talk." And he reluctantly did it. And there was me, and there was some random woman from Ontario, Canada, who accidentally watched him, and he sucked. And I'm like, "Good, you're doing it again tomorrow." So he went on the next day, and there was like 3 random people that showed up, and he sucked, but he didn't suck as bad as he did the first time. Walter, I'm so proud of Jason. 3 years later, he has done this every single day consistently for 3 years. He now has 6,000 people in his community. He almost made 7 figures last year off of the different things he was. And again, there, yes, it's great, the financial success, but the reason he's successful is he did the work. I tell people, if you watch the people that are the most successful at anything, I mean, Michael Jordan, best basketball player, you know, he's working his butt off. Tiger Woods, not only does he work harder than everybody else, he has a putting coach, he has a driving coach, he has a mental coach. I mean, maybe he should have hired a relationship coach, but what the thing is, he understood the value of getting other people to push him to heights he didn't imagine. And it baffles me. I see people all the time. Like, this is why I could never believe people that would actually pay me to coach them, and then they wouldn't listen to me. I'm like, well, do it your way if you want. I mean, how's that working out for you? I'm telling you, if you actually do it this way, it'll work for you. So I don't even know where I was going with that, but you got me passionate about. I want to work with people that want to do the work, and that's where the success. We have a lot of clients that come to us and they write. They're like, this last guy, he overpromised and underdelivered, and I've never understood that. It's called fulfillment. There's nothing fulfilling to me to take a person's money and not to produce the result. Like, the fulfillment to me has nothing to do with the pay. It's watching this person who, like you, had to put together 21 different versions of their speech and then was shaking like crazy and had to go out there. But I'm so proud that you actually did the work. That's what I want to be around, is people that are willing to do the work, and you'll see the results from the work.
And it's I do a lot of coaching is all centered around salespeople and sales managers and sales leaders. And what's interesting is that when I say, well, I was talking to my coach, and they're like, what?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, my coach. Why do you have a coach? Like, Michael Jordan had 3.
Yeah.
Tiger Woods, right? I mean, for all the people that you just mentioned, like you can't get better unless you're working at getting better and doing the reps, doing the work to get there. And where they don't want to, it's when they don't want to do that work because it's uncomfortable, because it's hard, right? But that's what gets you over the hump. And I don't care who's helping. If you said it before, Canfield said you can't, or Roan said you can't pay somebody to do your push-ups.
Yeah.
I mean, you can pay somebody to yell at you to do your push-ups, but you got to go out there and do it. And you start off, maybe you can only do 2, right? But if you keep after it, you find you're doing 3, and then you're doing 10, and then you're doing 20, and like you're off to the races. So I think that's it boils down to mindset and being effective at doing the work. Because to me, yeah, we want to get paid. That's important. Let's not hide that. But to me, what's cool is when the salesperson calls me from a long week on the road and says, "Hey, the thing we talked about last week? Well, I did it twice this week, and it worked." And I'm like, "This is awesome. I just wish you wouldn't be so surprised that when you do what I ask you to do, it works." So that to me is the joy. Like, I tell them, you made my week. You made my week because you went and did the work. Because it wasn't about me; it was about you doing the work. And it's that discipline, whatever you want to call it. That's what fires us up.
Yep.
So, you've dropped a bunch of nuggets here. What who do you really want to help? Like, what's your thing right now that would energize you, that somebody could call you and say, self-identify as, I want to work with Danny because he can help me with X. Who is that person?
Well, I'll give you my 10-second pitch that I give everybody. They ask me what I do in the elevator. I say I help individuals, entrepreneurs, and organizations leverage speaking on stages as a major client lead source that converts. That's who I want to help, is people that want to grow their influence, whether, so sometimes that's a free offer, like, subscribe to my podcast, or book a free consultation call. Sometimes it's a paid offer, like buy my product or invest in my coaching program. But I only measure my effectiveness in one way, and one way only. Does your audience decide to take that next step with you? And that's how we're going to measure your effectiveness. And what you were saying with the client, that he did it twice, now you're basically shampoo, rinse and repeat, let's make this go. You got to do those reps. That's how this works. So I love working with people that are serious about helping others, and that's really, sometimes it's just a tweak. I mean, Coach Jimmy, my business partner, he always calls himself a speech chiropractor. Sometimes it's just a little thing that we have to adjust. You have the right elements, but they're in the wrong parts of your presentation. And I really just get the joy from watching a person that wants to serve their audience, because I see a lot of people and they'll give a speech and like, oh, here's my first 3 nuggets and you can get the other 7 if you buy my product. I'm like, well, that's sleazy. The person just sat there for an hour. I believe you have to do something to help out your audience, whether they choose to do business with you or not. They gave you their time. And so as long as you help them, when we're crafting presentations, we want you to offer your audience a short-term solution and a long-term solution. And this is the smart crafting in a presentation. Is a short-term solution shows the audience that they can do it on their own. But the long-term solution is, if you really want to master this, you want to work with Jimmy and me, or I need to increase my sales. I need Walter as my coach, because Walter's somebody, I get along. And, I was talking to a speaker last week and I was asking him to help me out with some leads. And he said, why would I do that? You're my competition. I said, well, that's where you and I differ. I have no competition. I only have potential collaborators. The world's a big place, man. You can't have this scarcity mindset. If everybody only wanted to work with Walter, they'd only have McDonald's in the world. But we have competition. We have other places, because other people have different tastes. There's other people that do what we do, but they don't do it the way we do it.
Right.
I mean, I'm on this podcast, you're the first guy who was smoking a stogie. I'm like, this is great. This guy's relaxed. He knows who he is. I see so many people that are trying to be somebody else.
And it's inauthentic, and it doesn't work. I don't. I because that to me is the integrity piece of it. So if you're out there and you want to get better at communicating from the stage and putting your structure together to tell your story in an effective manner, have some fun, make a little bit more money, give Danny a call. What's the best way? I've got all your stuff in the show notes, but where would you direct them?
Spoken like a true pimp. I love my pimp, Walter. Thank you, Walter. Well, as a thank you to you and your audience for having to listen to me for a half hour, I wanted to give everybody their own free blueprint on how to craft that well-crafted story presentation. So if you go to freestoryguide.com, again, freestoryguide.com, you'll go through the 5C process that Jimmy and I take our clients through in our 2-day workshops that we do once a month. So that's at freestoryguide.com. And again, Walter, I appreciate the time, and I can hardly wait till you come to Denver so I can take you out
to Applebee?
Not to where we were discussing before, but to some classy places.
Awesome. I look forward to that. So last question, Danny, past or present, any relationship with cigars?
Oh, yeah. I mean, actually, I'm going to Cuba at the end of February, so I'm going to finally have an authentic Cuban cigar. I'm excited about that. But
what do you mean finally? You've never had an authentic Cuban cigar?
I've had not actually. I've had them that, like in Tampa, they have Cubans rolling them, but I'm like, it's not a Cuban cigar. It's like Cuban roll cigar. So I was reading Cigar Aficionado magazine. It was kind of a cool story because Cuba has a very high literacy rate. And the reason is the workers at the cigar factories in Cuba, there's a person at a microphone just reading aloud books every single day to them. And so they go through like a book a week, the workers. And I was like, wow, how cool is that? So I want to see that in person. I have never had a negative experience while I was smoking a cigar.
I have. But you're smoking a cigar, so
Yes.
you overcome it. I was once on a tee box with 3 of my friends waiting for the fairway to clear, and we're just waiting, joking around, and 2 of us were smoking cigars, and this lady comes from back in her golf cart waiting for us to get off the tee, and she comes marching up and she's like, sir, your cigar is bothering me, and I'm like, well, that seems fair. Why is that fair? I said, because you're bothering me.
Spoken like Winston Churchill.
And that was the inspiration. And her husband came back. It's like, come on, let's go back. We'll back up a little farther so that wasn't bothering you. But she was at least 100 yards away from me. But it was a good story, so I take
Well,
a
that's
positive.
great. I love it.
Well, I wish you well. There's some great Cuban cigars, and they are different. There's something about the dirt and the air and everything there, but I think a lot of it has to do with the people. It's just that they're an amazing group of people who have struggled for decades because of this oppression that's there. But I'm jealous that you're going. So have a couple of good cigars and a Cuba Libre.
Well, I'd bring you back one, but I've been told that that's a no-no.
That might change, but yeah, we used to be able to bring back a box.
Ah,
But if you go there on a mission and you're some sort of medical professional, there's supposed to be some loophole there. So maybe you might get past it with the doctor thing.
yeah, I'm a doctor. I can teach them how to read really quickly.
Hey, man, I really appreciate this. This was more fun than I was even expecting, and I was expecting to have a good time. So
You're just wonderful, Walter. Don't change.
thank you. Cheers. Hey, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to and watch this podcast. It's really important to me that we're adding value to our audience, the entrepreneurs, the founders, the people out there taking the risk. And I don't know that you guys realize how important it is to do what you're doing. Being an entrepreneur, I mean, you're creating opportunities for everybody in your organization. You're creating opportunities for your customers. You're creating opportunities in the community. And I think that every once in a while, when things, being an entrepreneur is tough, right? We know this, but I think it's every once in a while we need to take a moment in those tough moments and think about how cool it is that we get to do this and how much we actually are providing value to so many people. So you need to appreciate what you do, not just for your people, but for yourself. You're doing some great work, right? You might have a bad day from time to time, but you're doing great work. Keep after it, have some fun, and just enjoy this process. I thank you again for listening to this podcast. We've been doing this for a while. Our audience is growing. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss an episode, or at least have an opportunity to track it. Tell your friends. We're trying to have fun. If you got ideas, please share. If you have an idea for a guest or if you have an idea for a topic, please share. Thanks again, guys. Bye.